Hey there, my name is Justin. I wanted to chime in on a conversation that was started by the brilliant Alex O'Connor. He made an observation that Protestant apologists will bring up Jesus appearing to 500 witnesses as proof of the resurrection, but will deny, Marian apparitions attested by also witnesses, sometimes many more than 500. And why do we accept one, why don't we accept the other? If the reasoning is just like, well, big thing happened, many people saw it, does that apply generally? And I'm seeing, I saw a video by Capturing Christianity. I saw something by William Lane Craig. There's interesting observations there, but I think there's also just much simpler ways to think through this situation. Um, so, first of all, yes, please be skeptical. Please look at the sources. Please think for yourself. Um, you know, don't just like pick up a religious document or a newspaper article and just believe it must be true. You know, if it sounds fantastical, ask questions. Um, I want to go through real quick just some surface differences between the Jesus appearances and the Marian apparitions. So one is that Jesus was appearing in the flesh. At least that's the claim in the Bible, right? And also like by Josephus, right? So he was there. You could talk to him. Um, you could touch him, right? That's attested in the Bible. At least that's the claim. There's also differences in the duration. So Jesus appearing after his death was over the course of like 40 days to multiple audiences. The Marian apparitions are typically a single event, maybe a couple events. Um, I think the Catholic Church recognizes 16 apparitions, and they allow for like local bishops to recognize smaller ones. Um, but they're typically like, oh, big flashy thing in the sky, and a lot of people see it, but that's kind of the end of it. Um, there's also differences in the locations. So Jesus, when he met with people after his resurrection, it was in multiple places. It was in a house. It was outside. It was on a mountain. It was to Paul in a whole different place. Um, with the Marian things, it's usually like a shorter single event. There's some that stick out as different, but it's typically not a like, oh, you can interact with him for a few days, and if you forgot to ask him something, you can ask him the next day. Um, there's also just a big difference in the witness knowledge. So with the appearance of Jesus, it was like he died, and then 3 days later he was alive. This is well, at least from the claim, it's well within the lifetime of witnesses. It's well within the lifetime of people who knew him and interacted with him. And, for the disciples, they followed him around. For the 500, presumably they're people who were in the crowds or shaking palm leaves. And, people who had witnessed this person, they could verify, yeah, this is Jesus. And I understand there's questions about like, well, don't they have a ulterior motive? Don't aren't there reasons why they might want to claim this falsely? I understand there's objections, but this is a categorically different claim of like multiple people over a relatively long span, more than a month, meeting, interacting, touching, still miracles happening, right? Like they're not all written down, and the Bible even says they're not written down, but the idea is that he's still healing people and doing the things that he was doing before, teaching and etc. For people who witnessed the Marian apparitions, they're not like people who were alive during the time that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was alive. They don't know Mary aside from like the stories about her. That's not to say that that refutes it, but it's a very different flavor of witness. It's a person who saw a thing, but not a person who knew a person and is knowing the person again. And there's other evidence that corroborates the Jesus things, like I mentioned, Antiquities of the Jews by Flavius Josephus, and multiple epistles gospel accounts, they corroborate the same thing happening. The apparitions also have things corroborating the apparitions, but it's usually people at the one single event that it happened. So, but to kind of get back, like, what is that evidence of? What are those two things evidence of? So, this is where the real thing comes in for me. The resurrection of Jesus is, or the appearance of Jesus, the attested, witnessed appearance of Jesus after he was witnessed dying, is a reasonable evidence to bring up when discussing did he get resurrected. Doesn't mean that he did get resurrected. You can still people can make false claims, but it fits within that frame. I can't use the Marian apparitions in the same way, right? Like, you can't say, well, you should pray the rosary because Mary appeared in the sky. It doesn't logically follow. Like, what is it evidence of? Let's assume, just thought experiment. Let's assume the Marian apparitions 100% really are Mary, the mother of Jesus, interacting with the fleshly world. What do they prove? Do they prove anything that Protestants don't believe? Like, they could be evidence that Mary's alive, but that's kind of tenuous because it's just like a vision in the sky. Like, it could be God making the clouds look like it. It could be him bending the light or whatever, right? The most attested Marian apparitions are usually like a sky thing, a sky phenomenon. And some of them are pretty compelling, like especially the one that Capturing Christianity highlights, where Muslims are seeing it and they're trying to shut it down. They're trying to like turn off the power, but they still see it and they still report on it. And that's kind of wild. There are Marian apparitions where people interact with Mary, but they're fewer and they're less attested. And I'm not like an expert in this, but as an example, Our Lady of Guadalupe is a meeting with a former Aztec guy. He says that Mary appeared to him and told him he has to build a church. Mary also appears to his uncle in a separate event, and then appears to him again and burns an image of herself on his cloak. First of all, from like a Protestant perspective, this doesn't really, or even a biblical, like even Jewish perspective, it doesn't really pass the testimony established by two or more witnesses test, because these are three different events that all happen in isolation, kind of related, kind of in the same timeline, but it's not like two people heard Mary do this. That's not to say that the Bible doesn't have any of these kind of events, like the angel appearing to Mary in the gospel accounts. She supposedly she's alone. If she's not alone, then it's not there. And there's other things that attest it later with more witnesses, in like with her uncle and other stuff. Anyway, but even if Mary's alive, does that disprove something that Protestants don't believe? Like, we Protestants will believe that people who have died are alive, at least in some form. Like, Jesus says this in Matthew 22. 22:32, he's talking about a different conversation from the Old Testament, from Exodus, where God's talking to Moses, and he says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Jesus' point, coming back to Matthew, is that he's not like, well, I was their God when they were alive. He's like, I'm their God. And Jesus says that implies they're alive. He's talking specifically in the context of resurrection. So I don't think it's a stretch for Protestants to believe that Mary's alive. And there's other things, like there's King Saul, the first king of Israel. He, after his advisor, a prophet named Samuel, dies, he loses the favor of God, and then he goes to a witch, and he has the witch conjure up Samuel, and Samuel it basically tells him like, why are you talking to me, bro? Like you gotta get right with God, not with me. And the Bible presents it as though like the witch is really conjuring this person. This person really is Samuel, and this really is like what he would say, what he did say to Saul. So anyway, I'm not here. I'm not thinking like the appearances in the sky. Like if we really, or like the Guadalupe one, like if that's really, really, really Mary, and that proves she's alive. Does that prove something that's inconsistent with a Protestant understanding of the Bible? Because she was a faithful person, we would expect, she also made it. Um, but the appearances are not evidence that like Mary is divine or sinless, because there are other people that we see in the Bible appear that are sinful, like Moses and Elijah appeared to Jesus and his disciples, and they have their sins recorded in the Bible. They, they're sinners just like me. Um, so I don't think like if we take it that Mary's really appearing in the sky, I don't think that's proof of the Catholic belief that she's sinless. Um, it's not proof that we should pray to her. It's not proof that praying the rosary is effective. It's not even really proof that like Mary approves of a Catholic understanding of herself. Like maybe she's showing up because she's angry, right? Like there's not a lot of there's not like it's a vision in the sky. It's not like she's saying, "Wow, Catholicism is the one true only religion." That's not really the recorded attested account. It doesn't mean that Mary approves of the witnesses. It doesn't. There's not even really evidence that it is specifically Mary. Like just because there's an appearance in the sky. I mean, I'm getting out of the thought experiment that it really is Mary, but where's the evidence that it is Mary? There's nobody that was alive during the time of Mary saying, yes, this is definitely Mary, the mother of Jesus. Anyway, um, I I kind of with all those things laid out, I kind of fail to see how this is like a checkmate Protestants move, because they are fairly different occurrences. There are more than one Marian appearance, and they're spread out pretty far over time. They are spread out over different locations, but they're not the same thing. They're not like a continuous 40-day event of Jesus just like rolling around and being like, "Hey guys, look, I can still heal lepers." Right? It's a very different thing. And even if they're all true, they don't prove something doctrinally in favor of Catholicism. Like it's hard to verify any part of those stories for the reasons that I said. Like, it's easier if you saw Jesus die a week ago and then you see him walking around. That's a much different thing from, oh, Mary was this person that I've read about in the Bible, and 1500 years later I saw something in the sky that I'm guessing was Mary. A very, very different categories of experience. And even if we grant that they're real, I don't think they even really conflict with Protestant, like a really traditional Protestant understanding of the Bible. Anyway, I wanted to throw that out there. I do appreciate the conversation. I appreciate thinking these things through. I don't think this is like a slam dunk. Oh wow, Protestants, you're in real hot trouble now. I think this is more of a maybe just a misunderstanding of how these things are sort of related, and maybe they've been argued poorly over time. But I think they're just way too different to lump into the same category. Anyway, let me know what you think.